The wind howled across the Wyoming plains like a warning that night, carrying with it the sharp bite of winter and the smell of approaching snow. Daniel Hayes had lived his entire life under that sky. A hardened cowboy whose heart had been shaped by dust, cattle drives, and long lonely nights beside a fire. Men in the town of Red Ridge respected him, though few truly knew him. Daniel wasn't the type to talk much about his past. All anyone knew was that he worked harder than most, spoke less than anyone, and had a strange way of noticing things others ignored. That evening he was riding home, later than usual after delivering cattle to a neighboring ranch, when he saw something that made his horse suddenly slow beneath him. A carriage sat crooked near the road, one wheel broken, the driver nowhere to be seen. The lantern hanging from its side flickered weakly against the darkness, casting trembling shadows across the frozen ground. Daniel frowned. Out here, a broken carriage meant trouble. He swung down from his saddle and approached carefully, his boots crunching on frost-covered dirt. That was when he heard it, a faint sound, almost lost in the wind. A quiet, desperate sob. His hand instinctively moved toward the revolver at his hip as he stepped closer to the carriage. "Hello," he called into the darkness. No answer came at first, only the restless whisper of the wind. Then, from behind the carriage, a trembling voice spoke. "Please, don't hurt me." Daniel rounded the carriage slowly, and what he saw made his chest tighten. A young woman crouched beside the broken wheel, her thin coat dusted with snow. Her hands were shaking, and her face, pale beneath tangled strands of dark hair, looked both exhausted and terrified. She couldn't have been more than 20. "Easy now," Daniel said quietly, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe." The woman looked up at him with eyes full of fear and disbelief, as though she had been waiting a long time to hear those words. "My name's Daniel Hayes," he added gently. "What happened here?" The woman hesitated before speaking, as if unsure whether she could trust him. Finally she whispered, "My name is Emily Carter, and I was supposed to be married tomorrow." Daniel blinked in surprise. A mail-order bride. Red Ridge had seen a few of those over the years. Women from the East who answered lonely ranchers' advertisements, hoping to build a new life out west. But the fear in Emily's eyes told him something had gone terribly wrong. "Where's the man you were meant to marry?" Daniel asked. Emily's face tightened, and she looked away toward the dark road behind them. "He's looking for me," she said quietly. The words carried a chill colder than the wind. Daniel studied her for a moment. She wasn't lying, that much he could tell. And whatever she had escaped from had left her trembling like a wounded deer. "Then we'd better get you somewhere warm," he said firmly. "Storm's coming." Emily looked at him as though his offer was the first kindness she had heard in weeks. "Why would you help me?" she asked softly. Daniel shrugged as he untied a blanket from his saddle. "Because no one deserves to freeze out here." He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and helped her onto his horse before climbing up behind her. As they rode toward his ranch beneath the rising snow, Daniel couldn't shake the strange feeling that this chance meeting was about to change both of their lives in ways he couldn't yet understand. What he didn't know was that Emily Carter hadn't just been running from something. She had been running toward something too. And that something was him. By the time they reached Daniel's small cabin at the edge of the valley, the storm had grown fierce. Snow swirled through the air like a curtain of white. Daniel helped Emily down and led her inside where a fire crackled in the hearth. The warmth seemed to melt some of the fear from her face, though her hands still trembled as she held the mug of coffee he gave her. For a while neither of them spoke. Then Emily finally looked up at him and said something that made his heart stop. "You saved me tonight," she said softly. "But the truth is, I've been trying to find you for months." Daniel stared at her, completely confused. "Find me?" he asked. Emily nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Because the man I was supposed to marry, he wasn't the one who wrote the letters." Daniel felt the room grow very still. "What letters?" he asked. Emily reached into the small bag she carried and carefully pulled out a bundle of worn envelopes tied together with string. She placed them on the table between them. "These," she whispered. Daniel picked one up slowly. The moment he saw the handwriting, his heart skipped. Because he recognized it instantly. It was his. And suddenly the night's strange encounter began to feel less like coincidence and more like destiny. Daniel Hayes sat frozen in his chair, staring at the letters spread across the table like ghosts from a past he had long tried to forget. Each envelope carried his unmistakable handwriting. Each page filled with words he remembered writing during the loneliest months of his life. Months when the ranch had felt too quiet, when the night stretched too long, and when the idea of companionship had seemed worth the risk of opening his guarded heart. He had placed an advertisement in a newspaper in St. Louis nearly a year earlier. Something he had almost regretted the moment he sent it. A simple request for correspondence. Perhaps even marriage if the right woman came along. But after writing several hopeful letters to a woman named Emily Carter, the replies had suddenly stopped. Weeks had turned into months. And eventually Daniel had assumed she had simply changed her mind. It wouldn't have been the first time disappointment had come knocking at his door. But now here she was, sitting across from him beside the fire, her tired eyes shining with emotion as she watched him realize the truth. "You're the man who wrote those letters," she said softly. Daniel nodded slowly, still stunned. "I thought you stopped writing," he admitted. Emily shook her head quickly. "I didn't. I wrote back every time." Daniel frowned. "Then why did the letters stop coming?" Emily hesitated, her hands tightening around the edge of the table. "Because someone else answered. The last one instead of you." She took a shaky breath before continuing. "The man who was supposed to marry me, George Whitaker, told me he was you." Daniel felt anger spark in his chest. George Whitaker was a name he recognized. A cruel rancher from the far side of Red Ridge known for his temper and greed. "He must have intercepted the letters somehow," Emily explained quietly. "When I arrived in town yesterday, I knew immediately something was wrong. He wasn't the man from the letters. Not even close." Daniel clenched his jaw as he imagined the fear she must have felt. "So you ran," he said. Emily nodded. "I waited until dark. I stole the carriage and tried to leave before the wedding could happen. But the wheel broke on the road." She looked down at her hands. "I thought he would find me." Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of the story settle in his mind. For months he had believed Emily Carter had simply disappeared from his life. Yet she had crossed half the country believing she was coming to meet him. And somehow fate had placed him on that road at the exact moment she needed saving. The thought made his chest tighten in a way he wasn't used to feeling. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the cabin the firelight flickered warmly across the wooden walls. Daniel looked at Emily again, really looked at her this time. She was stronger than she seemed. Anyone who could travel across the country alone and escape a man like Whitaker possessed courage few people ever found in themselves. "You said you were running to me," Daniel said quietly. Emily met his eyes, a faint hopeful smile touching her lips. "Because I believed the man in those letters was real," she said. "Kind, honest. Someone who believed in giving people a chance." Daniel felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. He had never imagined his lonely words on paper could mean so much to someone else. "You rode straight into a snowstorm chasing a stranger," he said gently. Emily shook her head. "Not a stranger. A man whose words made me believe a better life was possible." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel stood and walked to the door, looking out into the swirling white night. Somewhere beyond the storm was George Whitaker, likely furious and searching for the woman who had escaped him. But Daniel Hayes had spent his entire life protecting what was his. And tonight, for reasons he was only beginning to understand, he felt responsible for Emily Carter. He turned back toward her with quiet determination in his eyes. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "Whitaker won't touch you." Emily's eyes filled with tears again, though this time they were tears of relief. Days passed as the storm finally cleared and news spread through Red Ridge about what had happened. Whitaker tried to claim Emily as his bride. But when the townspeople learned the truth, and when Daniel produced the letters proving the deception, the town turned against the cruel rancher. Whitaker left Red Ridge soon after, his reputation shattered. Life slowly returned to normal on the ranch, but one thing had changed forever. Emily stayed. At first she insisted it was only until she could decide where to go next. But the truth was obvious to anyone who saw them together. The quiet cowboy who once believed he was destined for a lonely life had found someone who understood him. And the brave young woman who crossed the country searching for hope had discovered that the men from the letters had been real all along. One evening weeks later, Daniel stood beside Emily on the porch watching the sunset paint the plains gold. Funny how things work out, he said thoughtfully. Emily smiled. I didn't run away from my wedding, she replied softly. I ran toward the right one. Daniel looked at her. His usual quiet expression softening in a way the town had never seen before. And in that moment both of them realized something extraordinary. The rescue that snowy night had never truly been a rescue at all. It had been the final step of a journey that destiny had started long before. Either of them realized it. If you enjoyed this powerful story of courage, fate, and unexpected love, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable Western stories like this one. Because sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single moment. And sometimes the person you save is the very one who was searching for you all along.